So I think we're going to get started here. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is called Enabling Graduate Program Innovation by Creating the Conditions of Change. I'm Julia Kent. I'm Principal Investigator for the Innovations in Graduate Education, or IGE Hub, and also Vice President of Strategy and Program Innovation at the Council of Graduate Schools. So I'm joined today by my CGS colleague and collaborator, Matthew Linton, who is Senior Manager of Programs and Publications at CGS. Matt will be facilitating the Q&A when we get there. And I'm going to start with a few notes on logistics. So we are recording today's webinar. Feel free to share it with colleagues after the event. And the recording is going to go live on the IG Hub and CGS websites next week. You can submit a question at any time using the Q&A feature in Zoom. We're going to save all questions for the end of the presentation, but you can submit a question at any time during the presentations. So finally, you are going to receive a survey following today's presentation. Please complete it. It will be short, and it will really help us to continue strengthening the IG Hub and all of the offerings that we provide. So today's webinar is part of the IG Hub, which supports research, learning, and collaboration among IGE research teams and also the broader community of researchers and graduate education leaders who are working to strengthen STEM graduate education. The Hub, if you haven't encountered it before, serves as a national community for advancing innovation in STEM graduate education. It connects researchers and practitioners. It accelerates the dissemination of best and promising practices, and it helps institutions learn from one another as they tackle challenges that are common to all of us. So through idea labs and research dissemination and networking opportunities, the Hub helps move innovative ideas beyond a single campus so that effective approaches can scale and also have broader impact across graduate education. And for me and the rest of the team here at CGS, I think one of the most exciting aspects of this work is that it creates opportunities not only to share innovations, but also to build evidence about what works in graduate education and strengthen pathways for preparing graduate students for a changing STEM workforce. So we encourage you to continue engaging with the IG Hub by visiting our website, exploring the Idea Lab series, connecting with colleagues across institutions. And you can do that by subscribing to the IGE Insider newsletter and joining our LinkedIn community. And we'll have a QR code at the end of the presentation that will allow you to do that easily. So we're especially pleased today to feature colleagues from the University of Pittsburgh, one of the IGE awardee institutions, which has developed a really innovative approach to supporting multiple career pathways for STEM graduate students. And our first speaker is Dr. Susan Fullerton, who is Associate Professor and Bicentennial Board of Visitors Faculty Fellow and Vice Chair of Education in the Department of Chemical and Petroleum Engineering at the University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Fullerton also serves as PI for the IGE project, a personalized learning model for STEM graduate education. Susan and team, thank you for being with us today, and I'll now turn things over to you and let you get started.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thanks to you and Matt and CGS for setting this up. And to the audience members on the line, we're really excited that you're here with us this afternoon. So thank you on behalf of my colleagues. The team is shown here. Julia already introduced me. I'd also like to introduce Götz Vaser, who's a professor of chemical engineering, along with myself here at the University of Pittsburgh. Mary Besterfield-Sacre, who you'll be hearing from in a few minutes, is our Senior Associate Dean for Academic Affairs within the Swanson School of Engineering. April Dukes, who you also hear from, is a faculty and future faculty program director for our Engineering Education Research Center here at Pitt. And then Abby Steffen and Gary Lichtenstein are our external evaluators from Quality Evaluation Designs and a really important part of our team. We'd also, of course, like to thank the NSF and the IGE program for supporting this work. And I just like to go ahead and jump right in. And actually, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask you a question. So we'd like to know where do most of your students get jobs after graduation? And so the way you can answer this question is scan this QR code. You only have to actually do it once, and it'll keep populating the rest of our questions for you. Or you can join at slido.com and enter this number. But we'd like you to, and if you can't see all of the possible responses, you can go ahead and scroll. We just like to get a sense for the folks on the call, where do most of these students go to get their jobs after graduating from your graduate programs? And we can monitor the response number up here on the upper right-hand side of the Slido poll. Okay, yeah. So we're getting to about 1/3 of, well, past the 1/3 mark here of participants. We're seeing industry in the strong lead. Let's go ahead and give it another few seconds. Yeah, thank you for the honesty of I'm not sure. That's where I was when I started. I wasn't sure either. Small amount in government, probably a few startups down here below. Okay, so that's about a little more than half of the attendees have responded, and we can see that industry is the clear winner. And in fact, the data bears this out, right? So if we look across postgraduate industry employment as a function of time, it's only increased in STEM fields over the past 20 plus years. And April, you can click to the next slide where we see this plot of postgraduate industry employment versus time. And you can see the various STEM fields represented here. It's actually more than doubled since 2003. And so we all sort of are aware that most of our students go to industry. The data bears this out, and yet a lot of graduate programs are still sort of focused on preparing students for academic careers. And that actually makes sense because most of us, myself included, we've only experienced academia as part of our training and then as part of our career. And so it's not unusual to see that happen, but our innovation sort of directly addresses this problem. And so years ago when we sat down and we thought, how can we do our graduate education better, particularly in chemical engineering here at Pitt, we sort of noticed this sort of more prevalent issue that graduate STEM programming generally kind of follows this uniform approach where we narrowly focus on research and research skills. We are not great at adapting to emerging trends, in particular, like those trends in industry where most of our students go, because we're not typically tightly connected to industry. And we kind of default to providing career training predominantly for academic careers. And so the first goal of this personalized learning model and this innovation that we're going to tell you about today is to create this personalization through the duration of graduate school. And this isn't specific to chemical engineering. This applies across graduate STEM disciplines, that's inclusive and incorporates some professional training so that these students are really ready to be successful on day one of the career of their choosing. As we started to work on this, we then realized problem two. And actually, problem two was made aware to me and made aware to Gutst by our very talented engineering education experts on the call who are familiar with the engineering education literature and said, look, there's many cool innovations that have been highly successful in STEM, but the challenge is propagation, that very few of them have been propagated. And so this webinar today is, part of our goal to share with you the knowledge that we've generated, the things we've tried, the barriers that we've experienced, and the barriers that we've overcome, and how we've overcome them so that this PLM might be translated in whole or part from one STEM context to another. And so those are really the two problems and the two goals associated with this grant. And the learning objectives from the webinar today that my colleagues are going to share with you is, when you leave this webinar, we'd like you to be able to identify the core elements of this personalized learning model that we're going to share with you and explain its value proposition for the different stakeholder groups that might be involved today on this call. We will also identify the main institutional barriers that we experience to implementing components of the model, and then share out with you how we overcame those barriers, helping you to achieve this third learning objective of, starting to formulate actionable strategies that you could overcome barriers to implementing these interventions, maybe at your institution. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Mary to walk you through what this personalized learning model looks like.
Thanks a lot, Susan. So when we talk about personalized learning, you all have probably been aware of schools like the Montessori school. Personalized learning is not new. It's been around for a long time. There have even been applications in higher education, predominantly just with single classes and so on. And what we did is we really wanted to take a full court press to the entire graduate education, piloting it in chemical engineering. So based on the research, a personalized learning model has these 5 elements. You start with the instructional goals, and these are the ones that are going to be set by the student. What do they want to do with their graduate education upon graduation? So we sit down with them and identify what are their strengths. They write and they learn how to write SMART goals, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit. And then they craft an IDP. This is not necessarily anything new for different institutions, but this is going to be the basis for working with their advisor and kind of constantly coming back to this to see if that student is in fact meeting or if they are changing slightly their goals. And then the next piece is our task environment. So this is going to classes. This is doing the research. And what we have added to this is really putting a strong emphasis on those professional development streams. So part of the IDP is an individual might want to go into academia, or they might want to actually start a company of their own or work on their own products. And we do know that many of them will be going into industry. So we want to look at the task environment in terms of that coursework. What is it that they really want to do and need? And also from a faculty's perspective, it's like, well, if my students aren't really needing to do X, Y, and Z coursework, I can get them jump-started earlier and faster into their research, which then leads us to how we scaffold that instruction. So typically in the classroom, borrowing from undergraduate, we want to do a lot of active learning. We want to do guided practice, but also we want to really think through what that just-in-time teaching is and that higher order thinking on the Bloom's taxonomy. Under research, we want that student to move from being an observer to an active engager of the research. And then from a professional perspective, we want them to really figure out what are those things that they need to know? What are those business savvy practices? What are the things that they're going to learn from internships, seminars, workshops, etc.? Then, of course, we want to assess how well we've done in terms of the coursework across the research and so on. And then periodically, and we do it on an annual basis, is really have a long-term reflection and evaluation of the entire year, and working not only with just the faculty mentor, but also with the graduate director to think about going back to those instructional goals. How can we enrich them? Maybe some are going to go away. Some of them are going to be enhanced. Maybe there's some new ones. So that is our model in a really short snippet. And so as we look at this model, we might have people here that are students, faculty, administrators. And so we want you to actually do the next Slido poll, and that is, who are you? who is joining us today, because how you might perceive this, this model might have a different interest if you're an administrator or a department chair or a faculty member. And I can see they're all coming through here. We're up to 26 invitees. So most of you are associate deans or deans, some staff, a few students, that's good. All right, we'll take a little bit. We're up to 59, so we're a little bit at a little less than half. Let's see if we can't get a few more. All right, we're at 68. Why don't we, just for brevity of time, move to the next slide. So given we have a lot of people in administration, associate deans, deans. So I'm just going to talk really quick about the value proposition associated with this PLM model. And that from day one, we know exactly what our students are starting to think about in terms of their graduate degree. We know, over time how they're starting to think about in terms of what they want to do with their degree once they achieve their PhD. And so we know from the literature that this actually helps improve student engagement and retention in the program, but it also helps us build partnerships with industry as we are starting to have more of our graduate students engage with different aspects of industry, as many of our students will start going towards. For those people that are faculty members or graduate program directors, this type of model actually helps with student advising. So the student is not sitting there by themselves and they have their faculty, their research faculty member and a few faculty that they might be taking classes from, but that advising now is being opened up across the board so that a lot of people can start to engage with the student in terms of what their interests and desires are for their graduate program. So you have end up having richer engagement with the students. And also it helps mentors, because then the mentors kind of see where the students are wanting to go and they can help better guide those students. And then of course, from the student perspective, I'm now able to figure out how to tailor my graduate experience based on what I'm good at, what my strengths are, and actually what my career goals are. Starting this off, you might have one type of career goal and that's fine. And then maybe over time that changes, that's great. But at least you have a mechanism by which you can start working from and moving and transitioning across this. It also helps you understand where your coursework is going to intersect with your career goals. And from the very first day of grad school, you're already thinking about where your next step is going to be, and it helps you become more competitive in terms of those jobs that you might seek. So with that, we're going to start breaking out pieces of this model and kind of going into depth. So I'm going to turn the floor over to April Dukes.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did to support students creating their own IDP plans. Given that we've had this grant for a few years, I'll start out talking about what we did initially and then some of the pivots that we made after talking with our students. As Mary mentioned, IDPs are not anything new, but what we wanted is to give students a leg up on how to do this the right way from the very beginning. So we started with providing Clifton Strengths surveys to the individuals where they received their feedback that, based on their responses to the survey, will give them an idea of where their strengths lie. We had a workshop that sort of guided them through how to look through these particular results. And then in that same workshop for the very first year, we also talked about SMART goals. And if you're not familiar, the acronym is on the screen: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. The idea is to give them support on how to write goals that you can actually check off and know when you've done them. And this is one of those key items that we thought was important. So we started that at the very beginning of the fall semester. The very first time, all ChemE graduate students were invited to participate, whether they were first years all the way up through almost ready for dissertation. And then after this workshop, they created their IDPs and submitted them to ourselves. They were voluntold or highly encouraged to talk about their IDPs with their research advisor, with the idea that over time, this would be something that they revisit with their research mentor yearly, maybe semi-annually, depending on the situation, so that it would spur this process of this continual reflection between the mentors and the graduate mentees, so that everyone was on track and in alignment for what students wanted and how that mentor could assist them, or maybe find them other mentors who could help them out if it happened to be an area that they had less experience in. What we found is that students, for the most part, thought this was pretty good, but there were definitely some changes that would make it even better. And so I'm going to kind of talk about the results we got with the first cohort in the sense of their career goals. So there were different goals that we asked them, but what we saw, the biggest disparity between the first year students and the other students, whether you're talking about second or third year on, is in the quality of the goals. And by quality, I'm talking about the number of SMART elements you could interpret from their goals. So you can see from the figure here, and I give the reference if you want to dive into it a little more. First year students, none of them had any advanced SMART element goals, right? So they were still struggling with putting on paper or putting, digitally articulating those goals in ways that would help them know what they need to do to meet those goals and when they've actually completed them. Unsurprisingly, more advanced students, so second and third years plus, did better. They had quite a few goals that had advanced elements, more goals, that were at least advanced and average. And of course, there were a few who didn't submit any goals, but those are likely the ones who felt that this was just a checkbox activity. Through talking with their students, what we found was really there were a few things that didn't make this work for them. And so we spent the next two cohorts refining this process. So some of the changes we did is we separated the workshop. So instead of having one 2-hour workshop where they talked about Clifton strengths and SMART goals, we actually, in the second cohort, broke them into 2 separate workshops and extended the length for the SMART goals. And in the third cohort, we separated SMART goals from the full IDP. So they had some practice writing goals before we asked them to then take those goals and apply them to their own pathways. Another thing that this helped was it gave the structured practice and formative goal feedback so that they got a sense for how do I put this together. They got feedback from myself and each other as peer cohorts on how they could refine a goal that they put down to ensure that it has more of these SMART elements. And lastly, in the first cohort, we used AAAS as my IDP platform, which is an online way that you can put together an IDP. Students found it clunky, maybe not the best for chemical engineering students. And so we transitioned to using a Gantt-style Excel chart. This was a chart that is very similar to one they fill out for their thesis proposal. So not only did it serve double duty as being an IDP, but it got them started on their thesis proposal from the very beginning. And so far, we've found that these changes were quite helpful. Looking at the data, and here I'm having cohort 1 here on the bottom, and that's the same data that you saw on the prior slide, just first year students. If you look at first year students for cohorts 3 and 4, you can see that there is a shift in the quality of their goals. And so one of the key things you can take away from this is try something and listen to your students and your gut about how things are going, and don't be hesitant to make changes to make this a process that works for your students in your context. And so that's IDPs. And I'm going to turn this now back to Mary on the body of knowledge.
All right, so thank you. You can hit the first click. So April described the very first part of our PLM, and that is really setting the goals. Next, we really want to dive into that task environment and how we scaffold the instruction for our students. So we start out with data. We went across the graduate curriculum in chemical engineering, which consists of 5 classes that students all take, and we had them sit down and really reanalyze and refine and make their learning objectives better. We hosted a workshop where the faculty all got together. Some thought they had really good Bloom's-based taxonomy learning outcomes, others were learning for the first time. And we came up with a very rich set of learning outcomes across these classes. And then we brought in our subject matter experts. These are faculty from other areas, but industry consultants as well. Some of our board of visitors participated, and we end up having 96 learning outcomes, for which what we did is we applied a group concepting mapping technique where we allowed everybody to sort these learning objectives into areas where, yes, these are fundamental, everybody needs to know these. These are definitely graduate level learning outcomes, and then these are specialized. So if somebody is not really going to be doing research in that area, maybe they don't need to learn those type of learning outcomes. And then from there, we also had our subject matter experts rate them, not rank them. This all sounds a bit like it's a lot of work. Fortunately, there is software that does this, so it makes it really easy to facilitate. As we were adding these learning outcomes, our subject matter experts actually added additional outcomes, many of which were not specifically chemical engineering core concepts. Many of them start moving into business practices, professional skills. And so we separated those and had the group, the subject matter experts and our faculty kind of go through a similar sorting and rating exercise. And then we prioritize them so that we can start incorporating them. And some of them were communication, project management, interpersonal skills, business, finance. These were the top ones that came about. But from here, what we wanted to do is really start thinking about when do things need to be taught and how. So again, we use software associated with this to do a hierarchical cluster analysis, which then resulted in, one more click. Thank you. A complete curricular overhaul. And what we were doing is, and we have an example here of kinetics being a class where we have certain learning outcomes that are fundamental. Everybody should know them. If you've graduated as an undergrad in chemical engineering, you better know them. If you're coming over maybe from chemistry or another engineering background, these are things that you're going to need to have in kinetics and reactor design. Then there's a set of learning outcomes that were more graduate oriented. And then if you happen to be someone that this is where you are wanting to do your research in, there's this specialized area. And the hierarchical cluster analysis did this across the board for all of the classes that we had. So hence, when we were done with this, we had two sets of products, two sets of learning outcomes organized in a way that we could then start creating the curriculum again. So we have those that are specific to the curricular content as well as additional non-core content areas. Next slide, please. So where we're getting with all of this is really to try to take our curriculum and make it more modularized, so that it would fit with the students' learning objectives and learning goals that they had set for themselves. So typically, we have a 15-week semester here in University of Pittsburgh. This might be a fall semester on your far left. You would take transport kinetics, a math specific class, and then safety and ethics. And this would be your set curriculum for your first year as in graduate program. But maybe if we modularize this across 5-week intervals, we would have, one 5-week of transport 1, another 5-week of transport 2 that would touch on the graduate learning outcomes. And then maybe you're not so much into transport for your research. Maybe you don't take that third module, maybe you're going to take a different module instead. So here we have two different students with different types of modular schedule provided for the students. So with that, next slide, please. We brought together our faculty, and our faculty that we had 2 faculty for each type of area. For kinetics, we have 2 people, transport we had 2, math, and then thermodynamics. And then another class was on safety and ethics, where we had 2 people that were also working on that. So the 2 people on the bottom were actually on 2 teams, if you will. And then myself and April Dukes were formed together a faculty learning community by which we could really start to think through the classes and set ourselves up for that third area of the model, which is scaffolding the learning. So next slide. So we brought together our faculty and we met each month. We had the graduate director. In this case, it's Susan Fullerton, who you met earlier in the podcast, our professors. We engaged them with understanding what the personalized learning model was all about. And we worked monthly to kind of go over the model, where we were going, what we wanted to accomplish at the end of it. And if we think about it, we had our learning objectives already sorted into the 3 areas, but we also knew that we had to deliver content in such a way that we helped a student go from being dependent and learning the material from week 1, but by week 5, they needed to have mastery of that material. So it's not as simple as taking a 3-credit class and just chopping it into 5 weeks and you're done. It was really trying to redesign that so that they had those learning objectives associated with that first module accomplished, and they were comfortable moving on to the second level. If you could hit the next one. So in doing so, even though we had faculty that were wholly committed to this, there was still this level of angst periodically where we're adopting a brand new approach to teaching graduate education. And there were pain points along the way, or I call them angst, a little anxiety periods where faculty are like, is this really going to work as intended? And so we brought in our quality evaluation design team. There are our external evaluators, and they created a survey by which we could assess our faculty about every other month as they started progressing and learning more and more and starting to redesign their classes. And as the figure shows, over time, the adoption of what they were going to do was very high, and those pain points started decreasing. And then last click. And as a result, by the time we started our faculty learning community in early September, and then by the end of the first year, the faculty had all been working together for an entire year together, sharing syllabi, sharing how they're doing, creating their syllabi, creating each module so that when they were ready to implement it, it was ready to go. And then they also were able to then also take the non-technical or the non-core elements and start to put them into their classes as well. So this is part of how we modularize the curriculum. And now at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Getz, where he will talk a little bit about the professional development streams.
Right. Thank you, Mary. Yeah, the fourth and final element of our personalized learning model are the professional development streams. These are sets of co-curricular activities which we organize around 3 broad professional targets, as shown here: industry, entrepreneurship, and academia. The aim is to provide an educational breadth beyond the technical skills, enable the students to develop a professional identity, and prepare them for their target career before graduation, basically starting on day 1 of their graduate studies. All these streams very significantly include and leverage strategic engagement with partners outside the university, such as industry partners, professional organizations. For us, it's the ASEHE, the National Professional Organizations for Chemical Engineers, and alumni at major companies, at startups, and in academia. So our students, our incoming students, are encouraged to join one or more of these streams corresponding to their career path that align best with their personal goals and ambitions. Now, importantly, that's not meant to be a new box. We don't want to just box them in a new way now. They can join more than one of these streams. And we see, for example, not surprisingly, a significant overlap between industry and entrepreneurship of students that are not quite sure yet between the two. And they can also switch the streams at any time during their studies as their career goals may mature and change over the duration of their studies. Their initial decision is guided by our Strength Finder assessment in the first semester that April talked about earlier. And I will just very, very briefly touch on each of these three streams. Industry, we started out in the beginning already showing that about 80% of engineering graduates go into industry. However, our graduate education really is conventionally fairly narrowly focused on developing research skills and technical specialization during graduate studies. Unsurprisingly, therefore, industry polls show over and over again that many students lack critical professional skills upon graduation and need to acquire those on the job only. So the goal of the industry stream is really to address this by preparing students to be successful on day one of their industry jobs by increasing contact with industry professionals early on, giving them industry experience and adding non-technical core training, for example, by taking classes in the law school or the business school or things like that. The second stream is the entrepreneurship stream that is led by my colleague, Chris Wilmer, who himself is a successful serial entrepreneur. It's probably the most unique among our streams here. It aims to create really awareness among students that spinning off a startup company or joining an early stage startup is a viable and valued option for them. It requires, of course, unique skills and knowledge. And I have to say, we and Chris have really been spectacularly successful with the stream, with having multiple student-funded founded startups out of the program over the last couple of years already, who won major national and international startup pitch competitions, really showing that there is really curiosity and ability among our students to explore these new options once they're actually pointed out to them, once we guide them in that direction. The third and final stream then is the academic or national lab stream, which we often refer to simply as the academia stream, but really includes research careers at national labs. That's probably in many ways the most conventional target for graduate education. Our goal here is really to give the students targeted guidance to support preparation towards their academic career of choice. That also means, for example, making them aware of the breadth of academic careers beyond the R1 research programs like the one that they're going through. So they learn from experiences that are not necessarily their own about more opportunities here. Now, there is nothing magic about these three streams. And I saw in the Q&A, for example, already people asking about medical fields and other STEM fields. Depending on your graduate program, these streams could look very different, right? I mean, there will be targeted, just like the whole idea of our educational model is here, personalization. That, of course, also means that the elements here need to be individualized and personalized for the programs. However, the overarching goal here really is to provide educational depth beyond the traditional academic core skills, enable students to develop their own unique professional identity and prepare them for their target careers from day one of their graduate studies, not just like in the last semester before they graduate, but really have that intentionality throughout their studies. So next slide, please. So here's again a very, very brief overview of our PLI model. It integrates, again, principles of personalized learning that start with establishing instructional goals and set a task environment, go from there through a scaffolded instruction, a pedagogical approach that aims for student independence and subject mastery, assess the outcome, reflect on it, and feed that back into the instructional goals for sort of a continuous refining. And these are, again, supported by the four elements that we introduced you to in our webinar here: the individual development plans, the identification of a body of knowledge, and modularization of classes based heavily on our faculty learning community that enable that new coursework. And all of that is then supported through a suite of co-curricular activities via the professional development streams to enhance student learning outside the classroom and allow them to develop their professional identity more broadly. So with these four elements in mind, we would like to go back and hear from you again and learn which of these four elements stand out to you as the most valuable ones that you could think about potentially adopting in your program. Where do you see most value? Is there anything that resonates particularly with you? So if you go back to the Slido. All right, seems so far fairly balanced. All right. Seems like we are moving towards the professional development streams coming out ahead. I guess everybody likes to enrich the experience of the students with things outside our narrow academic field. I guess I'm going to wait another minute or so, see whether we get maybe again back to 60 responses. Okay. All right. Okay. Good. So it's good to see again. Professional development stream seems to be the element that resonated with most of you. The body of knowledge lease, that's interesting. I mean, it's also probably the most conventional part, or what appears to be the most conventional one. I have to say, for us going through that, it was really instructive and insightful to go through that body of knowledge exploration. But now, obviously, each of these elements come with very different lift that needs to be mastered in order to implement them. They're not created equal. Some of them require a lot of work, others much less. So our next question to you is, now that you have thought about which ones of those might be most valuable for you, what do you think might be the biggest barrier to implementing your choice? I mean, where do you foresee possible trip-ups along the way? Yeah, this is starting to look very, very familiar. Right. So it really looks like we, aka the faculty, are the problem here. And you may not be completely wrong, but I hand it off to April to take it on from here.
Thanks, guys. So many of the strategies that, or many of the barriers that we see here, are actually barriers that we ourselves face. We'll go through some of the things that we noticed that were pinch points when we were moving through this project, and then we'll talk a little bit about what worked for us. So starting off with the IDP, we were worried that this would be a checkbox activity, and we did not want it to become that. We wanted it to be something that enriched not only the students as they plan what they're going to do and explore, but also as a way to bring the mentor and mentee together on these plans. What worked for us, we've discussed already, being flexible about the format, thinking about how we support students so that they feel prepared to put together these IDPs. And there was some buy-in issues from faculty. I think it's something else on your plate that you have to discuss with your student. And what we saw is that by working with the way that we supported students to create their IDPs, when students had better IDPs, that went that level went down. So instead of spending time talking about, no, this is a terrible goal as a mentor, like you need to work on this, they were actually able to talk about the content and really focus on having those explorations of, is what I'm doing as a graduate mentee going to get me to the career path that I want? And then students seem to be more invested in planning, especially as this was rolled out over several academic years. They got to hear from other students who had tried it and found it to varying degrees helpful for them. For professional streams, there was this idea that faculty might think that this is a distraction from research. These are extra things that you have to participate in as a student to really engage with these programs. What we saw that is just getting the faculty together to talk about this and having students wanting these experiences really helped overcome that type of barrier. And for those students who did already have internships, they came back from those better prepared for their research and with quicker job offers. And so just from having a few standalone exemplars of how this could work, that sort of trickles down with other faculty to say, okay, well, it seems to work. It seems to be beneficial to the student and for them progressing. So it's not a barrier anymore. There is some difficulty sometimes in figuring out how to manage internships and graduate requirements. And so this is where, working with your admin support to really help not only necessarily connect the students to the internships, but find ways structurally to make this work if they're going to take a semester off from classes, for example. Our body of knowledge was mostly logistics. We had, I believe, around 29 individuals, not including the research team, who were part of our body of knowledge. And that's a lot of people to get together on Zoom and to get to, go through this ordering of looking all the learning outcomes, sharing their learning outcomes. And so we really had, when time together, we made sure it was structured. So there was a purpose to each of our meetings and that individuals walked away feeling like they participated and accomplished something. We also had a variety of individuals with the selection of our advisory board, which was the board we used for our body of knowledge, meaning that there was a diversity of expertise, career path, stage of career. So we got to see this from multiple viewpoints. And then lastly, which we only had for a brief moment of time, but having someone who is a dedicated staff member to help manage logistics, or if you're quite good with various polling technologies, make sure that you have a way to do this to make it easy to find those times to meet together. And then lastly, I will say that the modularization piece had the biggest barrier of buy-in from the faculty, in particular the faculty who had to redesign their courses. As you can imagine, that is not an easy feat. But because we had a faculty learning community that met monthly, that gave these little bite-sized times and small milestones for individuals to work on with the guidance of educational professionals so that they were sure not to waste their time spinning their wheels. They could talk with each other, bandy ideas around, and it really worked in about a year to have folks go from the courses that they had or that they were inheriting to this modularization. Also, the QISS regular check-ins, the surveys that were done to gauge how their barriers were landing, really helped us be able to address those really relevant barriers that were salient for the individuals participating. So we weren't guessing at what they were struggling with, we were told. And that's going to be really, really key. Coordination across classes is a barrier, but it's also one of the nicest things to come out of this project. The idea that all the faculty teaching these core courses were sitting in a room, looking at each other's syllabi, making sure that in math, if you needed a certain type of math ability to work with a specific calculation, that happened before, so that as a chemical engineering professor, you weren't teaching the math and the concepts at the same time. And so we found that a lot of this coordination streamlined the class experience overall for the students. And then lastly, how do you come up with clear learning outcomes? How do you scaffold instruction? If you're not an expert in evidence-based teaching practices, how do you ensure that what you change is going to actually work? And this is where having educational experts on board is truly helpful, whether you partner with your teaching centers or other institutions that focus on evidence-based teaching practices. This again ensures that what you're redesigning is in alignment with what we already know about how people learn well. So this is our last poll. We're curious about what you do to prepare your graduate students for careers outside of academia. We probably won't have necessarily the time to dive into this given the time that I see on the clock right now, but this is something that we can follow up with a list so that if you want to see what other folks are doing, we're always in the market for great ideas from other places. So take a moment, describe some of the ways that you do this. It could be the same things that we do. It could be completely different, but it's really, really nice to know what folks do. And so we'll kind of pause here for a second so that you have a chance to answer the question. And after a minute, I'll go to the next slide, but this question should remain open, I believe. If not, our email will be on the next slide, and so you can always follow up with us if it gets cut off really too early. And thanks, I see quite a few of these coming in. I see workshops, resources, networking. These are all great ideas. All right, just in to make sure that we have time for some Q&A, I will go to the next slide. If you stop having access to the Slido, let me know, and then I can go back. But we do want to share our email in case you want to follow up with questions. And so we would absolutely love to hear from you. If any parts of this resonate with you and you'd like to bring it to your institution, don't hesitate to reach out, and we will get in touch with you about how we can support you in this endeavor.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. We're going to transition to some audience Q&A. We've got some great questions lined up, but if you'd like to make your voice heard, now is the time to do it. The first question I have is from Jessica Scott. And she asked the question, can you share about how you communicated this shift to your students? What were their reactions? Do you have any valuable lessons learned? And what was some of the immediate feedback you received? So Mary, maybe I'll start with you, and then if other folks want to jump in.
Actually, I think both Susan and April are perfect to answer these questions because they actually are there right at the beginning with the entering class of new graduate students, and they actually hold a meeting with them to kind of explain how the curriculum is run. So I'm going to pass it to the two of them.
I can start, Susan, and feel free to chime in with anything. So at every activity that we have held, we let them know that this is essentially a research project. They're kind of a little bit of an experimental lab rat at the moment, and that we welcome all feedback. This is critical for this. We let them know like what our goals are. Our goals are to help them design their graduate program to really situate them to be the best candidate for those dream jobs. And I think that resonates with students. And even if they are not necessarily 100% sure what that dream job is at the moment, we let them know that the nice thing about this type of model is it allows them to flex and move with whatever it is that they want to pursue. And that can be really critical because you don't know what you don't know. If you don't know about a career, you don't know that it's going to be the best career for you. And that this model allows them to pivot very quickly to really explore different career paths.
Yeah, I'll add just a few onto what April said, just a few sort of logistical ways we did this that I think was helpful, which is that we showed the students that the faculty and the administration value this. So we were announcing it, advertising it in seminars. I had our department chair, Steve Little, send out an email early on about the importance of this, these activities and how engagement in them will help. I sent out a lot of email reminders, which I think are helpful given all of our busy schedules. And then just the growing sort of faculty support, right? Seeing that they're engaged in it, that I think adds a lot of emphasis and, I don't know, driving force for students to engage in it as well.
Great. Another question. This one's for Gitz. You mentioned entrepreneurship as being a really central piece of the puzzle here. How did you help faculty build out an entrepreneurship network? And do you have any guidance for institutions that maybe don't feel like they've got a robust network to help support entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a great question. And frankly, I mean, we have been lucky not only to have Chris Wilmer as a lead for that entrepreneurship stream, who has the personal experience in that, but also in the fact that we live in a sufficiently large metro area where there are a couple of angel investor groups and things like that, which allowed us to connect our students with those and attend events like that. However, there are many resources, I mean, like for almost any topic these days, but there are many excellent resources on the internet in that regard, and many student pitch competitions that also coach students towards entrepreneurship activities. So if you are in, say, a more rural area where you don't have these resources available, I think those would be great starting points to really connect there. And if anybody is interested in that and wants to reach out, I'll be happy to follow up and connect you as well.
Great. We have another question here. Modularization oftentimes means workload impact for faculty. How do you navigate the workload and faculty compensation, planning space, and other issues from the administrative side? I'm not sure who'd be best to answer that. Somebody wants to raise their hand and start off.
Mary, do you want to start off?
I'll start it, yeah. So we knew that this could be a problem, and that is one of the reasons we did want to have the faculty learning community to really work together to think through this bigger problem. We met for 1 hour each month, over lunch to really kind of talk through everybody's course load, how modularizing this could, impact how they were reorganizing their class, but also paying more attention to the learning outcomes that were deemed most important to cover. So often in education, there is the need to get through everything in the book. And what we really learn, it doesn't matter if you're an undergrad or if you're a graduate student studying doing PhD level work, accomplishing all these learning outcomes isn't necessarily going to make you knowledgeable about every single part of the learning outcomes. And actually scaling back, focusing on the ones that are most important, deemed most important, are the ones that you really need to cover. So that was part of us kind of engaging our faculty to really understand these are the ones you really need to focus on. And so these might be the ones that you're going to cover most as an undergrad. And for some faculty, that was a pain point. But over time, they started to learn how to okay, I can step away from that. And that's one of those specializations. I can save that one for that last module, if you will. So that was kind of one thing. We were also very blessed in that the faculty wanted to make this change. They just really didn't know how to. And so, the year-long process of just meeting once a month, leaving with a few action items for them to tackle each time, kind of took away that daunting task of what we were doing.
Wonderful. Well, just in the interest of time, I think that we're going
add
to...
something? Can I add something to that? This
Sure.
is Gary with QED. Just really quickly, it's absolutely true that the PI team spent a lot of time with faculty, and it wasn't just them poking in and out now and again. They really felt supported the faculty. But beyond that, our QIS survey showed that even though this was the most challenging facet of the innovation of implementing it, modularizing the courses, it didn't dim their enthusiasm or support for the innovation. They felt very strongly that this was so good for them and for students that that was a pain point, but it didn't diminish the
Oh, great. Great. Thank you, Gary. And I want to thank the entire Pitt team for the wonderful presentation today. Before we close, I just did want to remind folks, if you want to stay in touch with everything that we're doing here, the IGE Hub and the IGE Network, please do subscribe to our IGE Insider newsletter. You can do that through the QR code, and you can get signed up. There's no fee or any sort of other requirements. You can just sign up for the newsletter, and that will keep you in touch with all the interesting work that's being done by all of our PIs and projects like the one that you heard today. And with that, I'd just like to thank our audience for joining us and giving us such excellent questions today. And most of all, I would like to thank the entire University of Pittsburgh team that was on the call today for your wonderful presentation and incredible insights. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you all at the next IG Hub webinar. Thank you.